Hello and welcome back to episode 3 of The Terror Cellar. Today I have a really cool story. It's not actually a ghost story, it's more of a thriller, a very creepy thriller, and I think you're going to love it. But first of all, I just thought I'd drop in anyway and say hello. Yeah, it's great to be back. I've been talking to a lot of people lately about my podcast, and what I plan to do with it, and that I've had a lot of good feedback, a lot of people who laugh and think it's a bit of a joke and think I should be doing something better with my life. But I just say, I want to try everything. I want to do a bit of everything in my life, and right now I fancy doing this. Do you know what I mean? And I understand the whole ghost world is a bit subjective. Do you know what I mean? Because many people believe in ghosts based on personal experiences and cultural traditions and all that. While I guess skeptics argue that most ghost sightings can be explained by psychological, environmental, or scientific factors. Do you know what I mean? Such as hallucinations or sleep paralysis. And I've always been into this stuff, so I'm pretty mad on all this freaky stuff. It rocks my boat. And did you even know that Albert Einstein believed ghosts were real? One of the smartest, most logical men in the world believed that ghosts were real. As a scientist, he understood that energy is constant and cannot be destroyed. It constantly evolves. So he knew that it was possible for energy to transform. So if that comes from one of the most intelligent people ever to have graced our planet, then I'd say that's to be taken seriously, right? Anyway, I'm going to get on with today's story, because normally I like to have a little chat before I start. But today's story is based in southern Indiana, in America. And it's a creepy tale, and I think you're going to like it. This story is called Patty Pie and the Pointy Shoes. For years, I never told anyone the story of the pointy shoes. Not my parents, not my sisters or my friends. It was something that I kept completely to myself. My own sinister little secret, if you will. It was an incident in my life that only lasted for 5 hours, but seemed like an eternity. It happened to me when I was 7 years old, but I remember it like it was last night. My dad's brother, my Uncle James, had a small pig farm in southern Indiana. He was married to my Aunt Helen and had 3 kids, just like our family. However, where my parents had 2 sisters and me, James and Helen had 2 sons and 1 daughter. The boys, JJ and Max, were aged 10 and 11. Their sister, Patricia, was older than the rest of us. I believe she was 15 or 16 at the time of this story. She was an odd girl, to say the least. My sisters and I never quite trusted her for various reasons, but it was kind of a known thing within my family that Patricia was someone you had to keep an eye on. Anyway, on the day of the Pointy Shoes incident, my dad and I ended up visiting the farm, and for reasons I can't quite recall, I ended up being left there by my dad to spend the night. I remember I didn't really want to, but I also didn't want to hurt my aunt's feelings, so I didn't speak up. Needless to say, that was the one and only time I would ever spend the night on the farm. I remember when it came time for my dad to leave, he tossed my hair with his hand and told me he would be back to get me in the morning. I remember when I turned around to join the others that Patricia was looking at me with a knowing look on her face. She knew I was uncomfortable to be there, and I could tell it made her happy. There was still a few hours of daylight when my dad left, so that was spent playing with my cousins around the farm. JJ and Max took me down to the chicken coop to show me how things worked. I have to admit, at age 7 I was pretty intrigued by it all. That is, until Patricia spoke up from behind us. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention was that my cousin Patricia had this weird habit of making us younger kids call her Patty Pie when there were no grown-ups around. So Patty Pie surprises us from behind the chicken coop and tells us she wants to show us something. My cousins JJ and Max were good-hearted, fun kids to hang around, but even they seemed powerless around Patty Pie. Whatever she would suggest, we all would go along with, even though her intentions never seemed kind. The farm had an old silo on the property. It was old and decrepit, and looking back now, probably hadn't been used in a good 5 to 10 years at that point. Well, Patty Pie suggested that we play a game called Killers Are Coming. She instructed us to break off into pairs. One pair would hide and the other pair would search, whilst chanting the line, "Killers are coming." Patty Pie told us she had learnt it from some movie. She also volunteered to be my partner, and I remember feeling my stomach drop at that news. I didn't want to be around her without the boys. Of course, I was too shy and scared to protest, so off I went with my cousin, Patricia, aka Patty Pie, to hide. I immediately knew where we were going. I could read the look in Patty Pie's eyes. She wanted to hide in the silo, and that's exactly where she started walking towards. As the boys gave us proper time to hide, Patty Pie led me to and around the silo to the back side. There was a door on that side. Patty Pie said we should get in because it was by far the best hiding spot on the farm. She opened the door, and to this day I still remember the smell that came out the inside of the silo. It smelled of damp, dark stuff, some place that hadn't seen sunshine in a very long time. Patty Pie pushes me in so forcefully that I actually stumbled over and landed on my side. Then, instead of coming in the silo with me, she slams the door shut. The blackness was instant, and so was my fear. I remember immediately being angry at my father. Why would you leave me here? Couldn't you see that I didn't want to stay? I pictured my parents and sisters all sitting around a dinner table, smiling and laughing as I was stuck in this smelly old silo. I was in here in the pitch dark nothing. My mind began to imagine horrifying situations. I pictured an old farmer's hand flicking the switch on the grain elevator and the silo beginning to fill up until I was buried beneath. I pictured something dark and sinister lurking in the silo with me and ready to attack at any moment. I began to freak out and started yelling for someone to get me out. That's when I heard her laughter. She was right outside the door, listening to me laughing. I pictured Patty Pie standing there with a smile spread across her face like a wound from ear to ear. Suddenly, I realised, for as scared as I was actually happy she wasn't in there with me. Eventually, after what seemed like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, I heard the boys' voices. They were coming to find us and were close. I heard movement, and with a loud creak, the silo door opened. The daylight was blinding at first to my eyes, but eventually they righted themselves and Patty Pie was there. She just gave me a look of utter disgust, and then the boys got me out. We walked back to the house and didn't play any more of that game. Patricia, Patty Pie, never mentioned the incident to me, and that was the end of it. It would not, however, be the last time Patty Pie was outside my door. I remember a few things about the remainder of that night that occurred before the pointy shoes incident. We had dinner and for a while played games such as Aggravation, which is a marble and dice board game. I remember Patricia didn't play the board game. Then I remember going to bed, and for some reason they put me in the spare bedroom by myself. I thought it was a bit strange that I couldn't sleep in the boys' room, but decided best not to mention it. The farmhouse was old, with uneven wood floors. One could not find a square inch that didn't creak when stepped upon. When my Aunt Helen wished me a good night and turned off the lights, I immediately noticed there was a 2 to 3 inch gap between the door and the floor. The light from the hallway bathroom would come through the gap and act as a night light. I remember being happy to have it. Then I drifted off to sleep. Something woke me from my sleep at around midnight. It was about 10 minutes of trying to get back to sleep when I heard the creak of Patty Pie's door. It could have been any door in the house, but I knew it was hers. I could hear each step creak. I was paralysed with fear. I pulled the cover up so tight around me and peeked at the door through my fingers. When the steps stopped outside my door, I could see the shoes at the bottom. They were black and pointy. They arrived at the door and just stopped. I lay there clutching my blanket and staring at those feet. The shoes were off-putting. I could not move. I could only stare at the pointy shoes. Patty Pie was right outside the door, and she was probably showing that horrifying smile that was going to do something really bad to me, and I couldn't move apart from just lay there and wait. At some point, I remember peeing myself. This game went on for what had to be at least 5 hours. I never once took my eyes off the shoes, and the door never opened. She just stood outside and listened to me breathing. Finally, the first sign of sunrise came to the window, and eventually I fell asleep. When I woke up, the pointy shoes were gone. I didn't see Patricia the next day. My dad picked me up in the morning, and she had not yet come out of her room. I recall being very tired on the way home from being up all night watching the door. I fell asleep in the car and never spoke of the incident to my family. I never spent the night at their house ever again. I told my dad I didn't want to, and he seemed to silently understand. I also never brought it up to Patricia in the remaining years of her life. She died in an automobile accident at the age of 25. They said she survived the crash, but was consumed by the flames. I did not go to her funeral. Thank you to Connor Reed for sending in that story. Now, wasn't that creepy? That was really, really creepy. I mean, that girl obviously had some issues, right? Obviously a bit not all there in the head, basically. And she obviously got some kind of surreal pleasure out of scaring the boy and all the boys, basically. And what I would like to have known, or like to find out, if possible, is after this happened, did she remain the same? Or did she continue to be like this, like with her big freaky smile? And I'd just like to know if she had changed at all by the time of her death. I'm guessing people like this kind of don't change, really. They have some dark inner demons that they just can't shift. Anyway, it's the end of the show, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a great little story, that. Don't forget, I still want your ghost stories, and I will say this every time, every episode, because I want to drill it into your heads. So please send over, any strange stories you got. It doesn't have to be a ghost story, remember. It can be a creepy thriller. It can be something strange just in general, anything. A UFO sighting, anything you've got, please send it over to the terracellarpodcast@gmail.com, and it would be my pleasure to read it out, okay? And also, don't forget to download the show, like and subscribe. And if you would be kind to leave a review, that would be even better, because as I said before, it just helps the show get out there to more people, and it just, it just helps in general. And I'm still learning about all this podcast stuff, so I appreciate you coming on the journey with me. Anyway, I think it's time for me to go, and I will see you on the next episode. So don't have nightmares. Bye-bye.